Welcome back. You're watching NewsX. My name is Vineet Malhotra. Well, it has been over 40 years since the Air India Kanishka bombing, which claimed the lives of 329 innocent victims after a bomb exploded on the plane while it was airborne over the Atlantic Ocean on its way from Montreal to London. This was the biggest act of terrorism in the Western Hemisphere up until the 9/11 attack in America. This act of terror was perpetrated by a group known as the Babbar Khalsa, which remains active despite what has become the largest and most expensive investigation in the history of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. While the incident itself remains a blot on the record of the Western authorities investigating it, there have been many people who have tried to draw back the curtains of obscurity that linger despite the investigation by various authorities. None have been more important, arguably, than Tara Singh Hayer, a journalist from Surrey, British Columbia, who was gunned down in 1998 after revealing the names of people who were involved in the terrorist plot. Tara Singh, OBC, was the founder of the Indo-Canadian Times, the largest and oldest Punjabi language weekly newspaper in Canada and the leading Punjabi language newspaper in North America. He was the first journalist killed in Canada specifically for the work he did to expose the masterminds of this heinous plot that claimed 329 lives. In the aftermath of the Kanishka bombing in 1985, he started speaking out against the violence spread by the Babbar Khalsa in his newspaper, the Indo-Canadian Times, in 1986. He survived his first assassination attempt after his son-in-law noticed wires sticking out of a McDonald's bag left outside his printing shop. Over the next 3 years, he regularly spoke against the violent actions of the Khalistani movement and its leaders in his editorials. And in 1988, he revealed how, while visiting a friend in 1985 in London, England, months after the Air India bombing, he overheard a conversation taking place in offices of the Punjabi language newspaper Des Pardes, in which accused bomber Ajay Singh Bagri described to Tarsim Singh Purwal, the editor of Des Pardes, how the bomb was smuggled into Flight 182. Throughout 1988, he wrote several editorials naming people like Talvinder Singh and Ajay Bagri key suspects in the RCMP investigation, and in the August edition, he claimed to have heard Bagri boasting about the bombing in England in 1985. Well, a week after publishing his August editorial, he was shot in his newspaper office by Harkirat Singh Bagga, who pleaded guilty to attempted murder. The gun used in this attempt was linked to Inderjeet Singh Rayat, the only person ever convicted for the Kanishka bombing. Well, although he survived this attempt at his life, it left him paralyzed and wheelchair-bound for life. On October 15, 1995, Hayer swore an affidavit to the RCMP of the overheard conversation between Bagri and Purwal at the office of Des Pardes in 1985, which was made public but never admitted into evidence. Here is what the affidavit said. Bagri stayed talking to Purwal for about 1 hour, during which time the subject of the Air India Flight 182 bombing came up. Purwal asked Bagri how he managed to do that. Bagri replied that the Babbar Khalsa wanted the government of India to come on their knees and give them Khalistan. Bagri then said that if everything would have gone as planned, the plane would have blown up at Heathrow Airport with no passengers on it. But because the flight was half an hour late or 3/4 of an hour late, it blew up over the ocean. Purwal then asked how he managed to have the bomb inside the plane. Bagri said that when the device was ready, Sarjan Singh Gill was supposed to take it to the airport, but when it was ready and it was shown to him, he got scared and resigned from the Babbar Khalsa. Bagri then suggested to Talvinder Singh Parmar that they should kill Sarjan Singh Gill, but Parmar said no, because that would bring suspicion and then suspicion on them. And so they just warned Gill not to say anything. Bagri then said that he got someone else to take the bomb inside a suitcase to the Vancouver airport and put it on the plane on the 18th of November 1998. Hayer was shot to death outside his home in Guildford, Surrey, while transferring himself from his car to his wheelchair. A week before his death, he said, "If they get me, they get me. There's nothing I can do, and I'm not going to stop my work." Nobody has ever been charged with the murder of Tara Singh Hayer. This is even more shocking when you consider that Hayer had written to the Chief Superintendent of the RCMP, Terry Smith, about his concern regarding the threats he had been receiving just a few months prior to his assassination. All right, at this point in time, Dave Hayer, son of Tara Singh Hayer, former member of the Legislative Assembly of British Columbia, is joining us on the broadcast. Dave, appreciate you being here. Well, 40 years later, the RCMP now says that they have identified Mr. X, who tested a bomb before the Kanishka crash. Why did it take 40 years for them to come to this?
I think it's sad that it's taken 40 years for them to identify Mr. X. Now, Mr. X was only one of the person who was there when they tested the bomb. There were other people, and one was convicted of making the bomb, and then in the Jeet Singh riot, and he spent some time in jail, and then he made a deal with the defense when Air India, two accused were charged, Mr. Malk and Mr. Bagri, that he will testify, and then he got a very small sentence, like 5 years for killing 331 innocent people, and he would not tell the name of other person with them. He kept saying he couldn't remember. Now the RCMP had provided the information that Mr. X is dead. We were all shocked to hear that information and to hear that the RCMP knew who the person was. And I think what they done is wrong, and they should have told the families and the public who Mr. X was, and then hopefully they should have charged them while he was still alive. And so the family feels a lot of pain even after 40 years. And my dad, he had written in his newspaper 1988 which group did the Air India bombing. A week after that, they tried to kill him in 1988, but he survived. He was shot 2 times in the back, 2 times in the arm. And 10 years later, in 1998, November 18, before the Air India trial started, the charge 2 people who were accused of being involved in the terrorism bombing, and they killed him because he was going to be one of the witnesses. And there was inquiry done by a Supreme Court judge, a retired Justice Major. And when I was talking to him after inquiry, he said, if your dad had been alive, he had testified, at least one person would have been convicted, and maybe both, right? And so sadly enough, this tragedy had affected so many people and so many lives, and 40 years later, we basically had no closure. On the other hand, the Canadian CSIS, which had tape recordings of them making recordings of the people who did the Air India bombing, they destroyed them instead of sharing with the court. And that was another disaster from CSIS, of Canadian Security Agency, and to see with a slap on the face of all the victims and the families of the victims and the friends of the victim. And basically it helped the terrorists, the criminals who did the Air India bombing that killed the 331 people, and 86 were kids, under 16, and 280 were Canadian citizens.
And Dave, why isn't the RCMP revealing Mr. X's name? Shouldn't they be transparent despite the privacy laws when it comes to this?
In Canada, too many times they talk about the Charter of Rights, right to privacy. And I personally feel everybody has Charter of Rights, the victims, innocent Canadians, and also the accused, but they should be measured equally. In this case, Charter rights or the right to privacy of the person who was involved in testing Air India bombing, probably involved in terrorism, his rights are being protected, but the rights of the 331 innocent human beings that were killed, there were little kids in there, there were seniors in there, and people of all ages from all different countries, and their rights are not being respected. So I believe our justice system should look at the rights of the victims and disclose the name of Mr. X, and also if they need to make the legislation change, the Parliament in Ottawa, and Canadian Parliament should make the changes to the law that allows the rights of the victims and law-abiding Canadians and human beings to be more important than the criminal, the accused, and the terrorists. And many of the evidence was not allowed in the court because of charter rights of the criminals, and they should have looked at charter rights of the victim. Even my dad, the video recording they had made by RCMP and affidavits were not allowed to be introduced as the evidence in the court because he was dead. So in the Canadian justice system, if you killed the witness, all the evidence you had given to the police is not used in the court system, which is really, really sad and not right at all. And I think our justice system in Canada has some flaws in there, some major flaws in issues like Air India bombing, with terrorists basically walk free. When RCMP and CISA were watching who these people are, they knew what they did. Even Indian government had informed the Canadian government they might be a bomb attack on Indian airline, and still they were not able to protect the Indian airline, and that killed the 331 people, as well as after the case having the evidence destroyed. So I don't think it's all just RCMP's fault. Part of the fault is that the politicians, too many politicians have catered to the rights of the criminals or the groups that support these terrorist groups rather than supporting the ordinary Canadians and Canadians who are law-abiding, who are not involved in doing any wrong thing. But their rights seem to be violated when the rights of the criminals and the people who are involved in terrorism, who supported the terrorism, seem to be protected. So that is something I think almost all the Canadian sort of can't understand why the government has not done more to protect the ordinary people.
And Dave, the important question: do you know who killed your father, despite the prosecution or the lack of his prosecution in this murder?
I think we don't have all the names of the people, and the police have in a different court cases they introduce evidence where the people who were hired, drug dealers and gangsters, to kill my father, and their name was revealed, but nobody has been charged. And our understanding, talking to different police officers who are involved in the investigation, they have pretty good idea who those people were and who were the people involved behind killing my dad, and who are the ones who paid the money, who hired the people. And they say some of the people who were used to kill my father, they said they are not alive right now. But the people who hired them, paid the money, are alive. Just like Air India, these people threaten the witnesses. So many of the witnesses, when they come out to testify, and they are all scared. When police tell them, unless you testify in a court, your evidence is not going to make any difference. So most of the people decide not to testify because they don't want their families risk. And some of these people who are involved in terrorism, Air India bombing, and my dad's killing, they're the same people. And they use the threats, and they try to tell them they're going to kill their families, but they won't use the word directly. In Canada, unless you say they're going to kill you, they can't be charged. They can say, sorry, family, they chok the mange, right? And when you translate the English, it's translating, they'll pick up the family, but they say, oh, that's not a threat. But the actually person who understands Punjabi and who understand maybe even Hindi, they'll understand exactly what these criminals are doing. So criminals try to threaten the people, intimidate them. If they can't be threatened and they're intimidated, they just kill them, just like my dad's case. And so therefore, nobody has been charged, and I think we have a very good idea which group was involved, because my dad had named the group that did the Air India bombing in 1986, week before the assassination attempt, and after that he had given them affidavit, like he was killed, shot in 1988, and then 10 years later he was killed. But before that, he in the early 90s had given affidavit to the RCMP, which is available in any inquiry and other documentation that shows he named the group, which person he heard, and basically taking providing information that they did the Air India bombing back in London.
And Dave, also talk about what were the testimonies that your father gave for which he was targeted and assassinated. What was the nature of them?
In the affidavit, it stated my dad was visiting from Vancouver, from Surrey area to London, England, and he was visiting at the office of Desh Pradesh, Mr. Singh Puriwal, and he was on the second floor sitting there. While he was sitting there, Mr. Bagri had come to the front of the door and with somebody and rang the bell. And so upstairs were a very large office, but divided up into two by just cloth curtains. And Mr. Bagri had admitted, as for the affidavit my dad had given, to saying that it was their group that did the Air India bombing. Khatar Singh Puribal was saying, look, a lot of people are getting accused and threatened by the RCMP or other intelligence services, saying they're involved in the bombing. And he basically, when they were discussing, saying, no, it was their group is then they shouldn't be worried. I'm just paraphrasing it, not the word to word. But on the other hand, if anybody wants, they can read my dad's affidavit by doing a search, Google search on Air India inquiry or other information. And also on Wikipedia, the page on my dad's case on himself. And I think a copy of the affidavit is also included in there. And sadly enough, in this case, the police failed, Canadian justice system failed, and most of the politicians, even up to now, they don't talk about these 331 innocent victims. A lot of time when there's only a few small number of people killed every year, they will go talk about the anniversary and all that, and they have totally avoided most of the time. When Prime Minister Harper was there, he did quite a bit for it. Canadian Prime Minister for Indian inquiry and the victims, and before that, Paul Martin in 2005, which was after 20 years of Air India bombing, and that he visited in Ireland where the flight went down in the ocean there. And I was there with my wife at that time, and our Premier from British Columbia, Gordon Campbell, also visited there. And that was the first time any Canadian politician had come in person to say it was a Canadian tragedy. It was most people killed were Canadian. Bomb was made right here in Canada, in British Columbia, and by Vancouver area on Vancouver Island. And all the intelligence agencies were watching them. They had some idea that these guys were going to blow up Air India flight, because even Indian government had informed them from their sources. They heard they're going to do it. But the government failed to protect, so did the intelligence agencies. And it is the worst disaster in Canadian history. Right up to now, there has never been such a large number of murders of innocent people in the history of Canada. But most people in Canada don't know about it. So at the 40th anniversary, a lot of the media is covering the story. But for family members, it's just like yesterday. It is not like 40 years, because they remember all their loved ones. Some people lost their nephew and nieces. Some people lost their son or daughter. Some lost their mom and dad. Other one lost their brothers or sisters, and or their friends. I mean, to me, it was the worst failure of the justice system. Even after 40 years, there's no justice done. But this year, since the new prime minister have come in and got elected in Canada, he had asked his MPs to attend some of the memorial services. So today, June 23rd, in Vancouver, Stanley Park, there will be Air India Memorial Service at the site that was set up in 2007 by Prime Minister Stephen Harper. And at that time, we are expecting both, I think, 3 or 4 member of parliament from federal Liberal government side who will be present. Normally, even to the Conservative Party of Canada, their MPs avoid going to the memorial service. Most of the time, they have never showed up. Same with the NDP, and same with the federal Liberals. But this time, federal Liberals are coming because Prime Minister Carney must have given them very clear instruction to say. So the first time we have somebody in the Prime Minister's office after Harper who's listening to the victims or Air India family.
Dave, do you see the recent Modi-Carney meeting leading to more collaboration on tackling these extremists?
Prime Minister Carney and Prime Minister Modi met together in Alberta, actually in Calgary, in this area where I'm visiting with the Rotary Convention today. And I think it was a very good they met, because these two large democracies had to work together. And this tragedy of Air India is not just tragedy for Canada, it is for the world and also for India, because plane was there, many people were killed, also were Indians, at least many of the ones who are Canadian, they also descent was the Indians. Only way you can solve this problem, get rid of the terrorism, because terrorism has no place anywhere in the world, in Canada or India, United States, Israel, Pakistan, Iran, Afghanistan, in Asia, Europe, or South America, anywhere in the world. There should be no terrorism. But the only way you can solve it by prime ministers working together, where the intelligence agency can also share and not politicize the evidence, information they're releasing. They should really look at all the people, especially the victims. And all these criminal investigation agencies, the security agencies, they should look at the first and most of all, these 331 people's rights that were killed, rather than just rights of a few organizations that support terrorism. Either in Canada or outside. So I think the meeting between both prime ministers was excellent. I really appreciate it, even though I don't belong to the Federal Liberal Party. I'm actually federal conservative, but I still want to say the Prime Minister of Canada did a good job by meeting with the Prime Minister of India. And behind closed doors, they can discuss every issue that needs to be discussed, that's important to both countries, that can protect the safety, and also look at the economic development, also trade issues and cultural issues, every other issue that is there needs to be discussed. And these issues should be discussed behind closed doors, as most mature people and political leaders do, not like what Justin Trudeau, our former prime minister, who was a joke, tried to do. And they try to basically divide the people up and cause problems. And basically, he was the only supporter of the groups who were supporting terrorism, not the victims.
Well, considering the shoddy manner in which both the bombing and your father's murder was handled, shouldn't investigation be reopened, considering the fact that Babbar Khalsa remains very active in Canada till today?
I think investigation should be looking at all the people who support the terrorists. These terrorists that blew up Air India flight that killed 329 people. They were the second bomb put on, and that went to Tokyo at Narita Airport. It blew up on the baggage chain when the luggage was being transferred from a Canadian airline and to take it to Air India flight. A second bomb had going off in the second Air India plane, that would have killed probably another 300 people. So we would not have been talking about 331. We would have been talking about over 600 people killed, innocent people murdered. And the second bomb that went through Canadian airline to Tokyo and then was being transferred to Air India flight that's supposed to blow up another Air India flight and kill the people in there. And even the first bomb that blew up Air India flight, that bomb also was sent on Canadian airline to Toronto, and from there it got transferred to Air India flight. And then when Air India flight also picked up people in Montreal while it was on top of the island, it killed 329 people. So this mass murder, the worst one in history, Canadian history, and worst one before 9/11 in the world history, is very important to be investigated. Every government from all American government, because there were Americans killed there too, and British people killed there too, even their government and the Canadian government, Indian government, and other governments whose people were killed, work together to make sure these terrorists are held responsible. While any of them alive, we should try to get them convicted, throw them in the jail, and so rest of the life, so at least we can get some sort of closure for the families rather than nothing at all. Especially when the government agency, the security agency were watching these people, it was not something just happened from nowhere that nobody had any information.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.